Hello, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon. It matters where you are, or good evening, even if you're in Europe. Thank you so much for joining me. My name is Olga, known as OnestPress across the socials. This is a news recap where we will be discussing everything that did happen between yesterday morning or yesterday afternoon when I went live and right now. We're also going to have a bit of a forecast, what's to expect later today, but also tomorrow. And we will discuss national news, but also global news and geopolitical shifts, if you will. And we have a plenty. Again, please ask any questions. Please comment. I really love reading out your reactions and questions and having this sort of as a discussion. All right. So first things first, remember when Donald Trump repeatedly promised us to lower the drug prices by 1,500, 1,600, 1,700%, which is really kind of obnoxious if you think about what per cent means per 100. So 1,500 discount per 100 kind of doesn't make any or much sense unless the drug companies would be paying us to take the drugs, which I highly doubt they would. And so yesterday the White House issued this readout. And so where they say that last week President Trump sent letters to 17 of the leading pharma companies outlining steps they must take to lower prescription drug prices for Americans, including matching the lowest price offered in the other developed nations. And as far as we are concerned in the US, we don't really have socialism, right? And the GOP and the MAGAville is very much against socialism, but this is exactly what it is. Unless Trump is the king, who is he to demand companies, private companies, public companies to lower their prices or match any, pricing in developed nations? Really doesn't make much sense. And so then they also featured one letter as a sample. Ooh, the wrong one, but I do have it here. So this is a sample which was sent on May 12th, 2025, which really is kind of like obnoxious, right? He's first promising us that he already lowered the prices by 1,500%. Then comes this readout, which was yesterday, August 4th. And in the readout, they attach a sample of a letter that they sent out to pharma companies on May 12th, which really makes not much sense. But essentially, in this letter, they're saying that delivering most favored nation prescription drug pricing to American patients. This is an executive order that Trump signed, and to stop global freeloading and guarantee that Americans pay the same prices enjoyed by other developed nations. He is demanding them to lower the drug prices. And then they say, well, extend most favored nation pricing to Medicaid, guarantee MFN pricing for, which is most favorable nation, MFN, pricing for newly launched drugs, and also return increased revenues abroad to American patients and taxpayers. How and why and when? And provide for direct purchasing at MFN pricing. So essentially, he's writing a list of demands, which they promised he sent out now, but wrote on May 12th. And somehow they already lowered the prices, but the companies didn't know they would, nor they will, nor they even have to react to this. So why I'm saying all this? It's a bunch of nothing. Like Seinfeld was a show about nothing. This is a show also about nothing. Seinfeld was funny. I think this is less than funny. So I just wanted to make sure you understand what they're referring to and that there is essentially nothing that they would refer to. Hi, Martha. Hello. Love, love, love. Daily news recap. So grateful for the work you do. Thank you so much. Thank you, Martha. Thank you so much for joining. And everybody, if you don't mind, please click like and share. Not because I promise you I don't collect likes. It doesn't affect my, self-esteem in any way. All it does, it affects the algorithm. And so if people are interested in actual news, who are on the right side of the history, this video would be then recommended to them. This is according to YouTube. So if you wouldn't mind liking and subscribing, I would be very, very grateful to you. So, and I'm grateful to you that you're listening and watching. So let's continue. Now, in other news, United States, the federal government approved today, their central procurement agency has added now OpenAI's ChatGPT, Google's Gemini, and Anthropic's Claude. I have no idea what that is, but it is an AI tool. To its list of approved vendors. The move aims to accelerate artificial intelligence adaptation or adoption across US agencies. So, in other words, ChatGPT specifically would be deciding who would be getting Medicaid. And other AI tools here would be deciding who is getting what type of tax rebates and all that stuff. So the government would be run by artificial intelligence. And if you ask me, intelligence currently in Washington, D.C. is pretty much artificial. But now this here is what will be deciding what everybody would be getting. I'm not sure you're happy with it. I honestly am not, but I'm here to report the news. So also, yesterday I showed you pictures of the Rose Garden, which is now sort of like a perhaps memorial to the former Rose Garden because it looks like a parking lot. It has, no roses, so to speak. And then I showed you also this Gilded Age ballroom that would be built for $200 million. Now, what also a White House official shared with NBC yesterday, NBC News, that Trump is remodeling Oval Office. He is adding more gold. You saw this cheap things that you can actually buy on Amazon and spray it with gold and pretend it's real gold. So they're putting a bunch of that stuff. He also added already a golden eagle on the ceiling. And now he's also adding sort of like a golden rim on the ceiling as well. And then what was new to me, perhaps you knew about that, but I didn't, that he's also remodeling Lincoln's bedroom's bathroom, which here's a guesstimation that he will install some type of a golden toilet there. Otherwise, what would you do with the Lincoln's bedroom? But it's pretty interesting, and I doubt somebody would do that if they're planning on leaving, but who knows? Now, as to Texas, we discussed yesterday that 57 out of 62, I believe, Democrats have left the state to prohibit the voting on restructuring the districts in Texas, which would then win potentially 5 more seats for the GOP. Now, the Texas House yesterday approved warrants for Democratic lawmakers who fled the state to block the vote. Now, Governor Greg Abbott has ordered the Texas Rangers to investigate those members for potential bribery and legal violations. The investigation also includes anyone who may have funded or aided into this walkout. So essentially what we do know that, for instance, Governor of Illinois, Pritzker, has aided those lawmakers who went to Chicago. So is he's going to be prosecuted by this Texas Rangers? Is this a new reality show? Is this a season number 1 or what's happening? And also, let's actually, jokes aside or sarcasm aside, those are lawmakers who were elected to represent the interest of the citizens, of the public, right? And this just last minute changes that would affect 2026 midterms, that would ultimately affect everything else coming after. that they are refusing to partake in that or want to win more time for discussion, that now they are being pretty much prosecuted, literally prosecuted for doing literally the job they were elected to do. And where are the protests? Are we going to see any protests in Texas? Are we going to have more support for those lawmakers? Are they hiding? Who's hiding them? And whatnot. So, and if Texas can do it, this can certainly be replicated everywhere else. Now, what we also have heard from Governor Newsom of California, that he said, look, if Texas does pass this, we will be reacting and we will be restructuring our state to add more seats. Also, Governor Hochul of New York, she said the same as well. So in New York, there is an independent agency that deals with structuring of districts. She said that she will be eliminating this agency to then take full control. Again, we're changing the system, but you can't fight. As I always say, you can't show up to this poop throwing competition that MAGAville is very, skilled at, with, wearing some satin gloves and being very, poised and classy. You have to fight this dogfight, so to speak, and we'll see if New York and California will have to do it and what will result out of it. Now, Speaker Mike Johnson, if you missed him, he dismissed the House, right, to prevent the voting, to prevent the Epstein case discussion and whatnot. But he found himself in Israel. And yesterday he delivered this type of speech in Israel. And I'm not showing you any videos because yesterday, again, they flagged copyright on 2 videos of Mark Carney that I showed. So I will, just rely on me telling you. And tonight, or actually, once we're done here, you will receive your newsletter with pretty much everything that I said here without my commentary, just the facts. And also there will be videos so you can take a look. Now, U.S. House Speaker Mike Johnson became the first speaker to officially visit Israeli settlements in the West Bank. So he's not just there to tour Jerusalem and play tours. He's actually playing a very specific role here. And when we later discuss the global news, you will understand the magnitude of it. So he's visiting West Bank, where he says that West Bank is an essential part of Israel, and it should say so. It should stay so. He then adds that there is no United States without Israel. And so that we're so interconnected and our existence really depends on Israeli existence, which, again, it's up to you to think what you think, but to say that as a Speaker of the House, the first one to visit Israel, pretty bold, so to speak. Now, he was visiting the what is it called? Ariel University. So he spoke at Ariel University. He says that Judea and Samaria, which is West Bank, are the front lines of the state of Israel and must remain an integral part of it. And then the visit was arranged by Yisha Consul and delayed earlier due to Israel-Iran conflict. So he planned to do it earlier. Now he traveled there. Also, in other news, I posted it yesterday and everybody thought it was a joke. It might be actually a joke, but it's an official announcement. U.S. wants to build a nuclear facility on the moon. Are we nuking the moon? Is the moon, does it belong to us? I don't think so, but, whatever. So Transportation Secretary Duffy, the former reality show star, whose clip will never leave my mind. And if you saw it, you know what I mean. Unfortunately, this unforgettable. Sean Duffy, who's struggling to keep our planes in the air. Hi, Bonnie. Good morning. Good afternoon now. He's struggling to keep the planes in the air and restructure the FAA and, deal with what's DI, what's not DI. But he is now also playing this leader of NASA. So before, Isaacson was the nominee, which is he was a protege of Elon Musk. And once Trump found out that Isaacson was actually registered Democrat or has aided Democrats, he said, oh, hell no, he's not going to be the nominee. And so Duffy is also sort of the leader of NASA. And with this move, he's trying to push for to stabilize himself in this position, because if he were to start this type of a big project, he will then remain in office or in that type of position, and he seeks then to be approved, certainly, to stay at NASA. So essentially what does happen is Duffy is pushing forward plans to install a 100 kilowatt nuclear reactor on the moon by 2030, aiming to win the new space race. The plan follows increased lunar activity from China and Russia, who are pursuing joint space infrastructure. The Trump administration has proposed slashing science missions by 50% while boosting funding for human space exploration, which this project would be falling under. So we are killing science, but we're going to nuke the moon. Let's see. And if you ask me, again, this is my opinion, that this would be a very good project just to use undisclosed funds for, if you know what I mean. Russia does a lot with Roscosmos, or whatever the thing is called, their equivalent of NASA. They're allocating a bunch of money, but there is never a progress. But people are, taking the money and using it for whatever they want, and perhaps personal enrichment. Jeff says, "Hi, Jeff. Reactors on the moon is more an attempt to wrest money out of space at this point. It has no practical purpose just now." Exactly. Thank you, Jeff. I appreciate it. All right. So other news that were sort of, again, owning the clickbaity headlines yesterday were that U.S. State Department will be introducing this visa bond program for high-risk travelers. And so what does it mean, and who will be affected? So the State Department is launching this 12-month pilot program where some people will have to pay those refundable bonds, but don't forget, there is no system to issue refunds. They say it's refundable, but there is no system to even return the money to those folks, and where they would need to pay between $5,000 to $15,000 when they apply for a tourist visa. If you're familiar with the U.S. visa system, it's B1, B2. That's if you come for, pleasure, or perhaps for a short study program. It's not an official student visa or anything like that. It's a short-term visa where you can stay, I think, about half a year within a year, but you can have it for as long as 10 years. Now, so this excludes the visa waiver program for those countries. Those are 42 countries plus some. And so likely who will be affected are Nigeria, Yemen, Afghanistan, Haiti, Bhutan, and several Caribbean nations. Now, the CBI countries, those are the countries with citizenship by investment, where you can come in, invest, and get the citizenship from, Turkey, and other. They will be affected as well because they don't want to use different passports to get such citizenship. Now, when this will come, we don't know. It has to be entered in Federal Register. They have to put all the countries and list them. Certainly countries like, again, 42 countries with visa waiver program, but also a bunch of European countries and also Japan and South Korea will not be affected. So again, it's Trump's plan to limit countries like Afghanistan, for instance, who lost their TPI, right, the temporary state permit, or TPS, right, temporary permit to stay. People up to 600,000 actually people who aided U.S. interests in Afghanistan, who were promised visas, but also green cards and ultimately citizenships in the U.S., and they were held elsewhere waiting to arrive here. Then the program was eliminated. And now if they were to apply to visas, they would need to place this bond, which is highly, unlikable, that, or highly, it's a high cost for them to post such bond, right? And those are the countries that will be affected. Jeff says something more. Visa requirements and terms are generally reciprocal. We do it to them, they do it to us. Exactly, right? But again, if we're speaking about Afghanistan and whatnot, is it really affecting U.S. as much as it affects them, right? So, okay. Now, another news. This was today and very recent, about half hour ago. Attorney General Pam Bondi has authorized federal prosecutors to convene a grand jury into claims that Obama-era officials manipulated intelligence about Russian interference in 2016 election. The move follows referral from DNI Tulsi Gabbard, who recently declassified related documents. Again, there is no proof that whatever they were saying, that it is, um, you know, even valid or true. They also now issued this type of schedule where former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton should have would have been president, and former President Bill Clinton should be testifying, and all of that somehow is related to Epstein files. And they also summoned or right asked to testify the former attorney generals. You can see I posted the list on Blue Sky and X and Threads that I recently joined as well. So they put the schedule that throughout September and October, these folks will be set as testifying and talking about Epstein case. Again, what are they using it for? They're trying to stop the discussion, and they can't stop it, right? Neither MAGAville is interested to stop talking about Epstein, because in their cult, they believe their leader was never part of it, but others were, right? And of course, the Democrats are not interested in stopping this discussion. But then what the next step would be, or the next step would be to introduce, is to divert this discussion. And as I just mentioned, the GOP and especially the MAGAville is believing that the cult leader was never part of it, but others were. And they're pushing the idea that Clinton was part of it. He may have been, we don't know. But that's what fits their view. And so I believe that these steps are just feeding this narrative. They believe we can't stop talking about Epstein, so now let's divert it and let's put other people in, well, in the news media, so to speak. Nobody talks about Clinton, but let's put them there. So let's see what will result out of it. Jared says, hey, Jared, nothing but distraction. Exactly. And they can distract so much that we stop talking about it, but they want to now redirect the conversation. Bonnie says his obsession with Obama is just plain creepy. Exactly. But he's losing his base, and he has to distract even. Exactly. So we all agree, right? We all agree. And Jeff says another attempt to deflect from Epstein. Yes. Okay. Now, in other news, business and tech, Tesla awarded Elon Musk $29 billion. Remember when Musk wanted to have a paycheck, literally receive a paycheck from Tesla, which was $56 billion. This was a pay package that he said he actually went to court to fight for it, that he should be getting. And the Biden administration was very much against it because it would be affecting our economy. I mean, $56 billion issued, paid out to one person. Now, what they did do yesterday, that Tesla granted Musk 96 million restricted shares worth $29 billion in a good faith effort to retain him amid distractions from his other ventures, pretty much trying to buy his attention. His own company tries to get the daddy back. The grant follows legal disputes over his earlier $56 billion pay package, which courts previously invalidated. Tesla stock has risen $735 billion in value since 2018, and the company noted. But also what the company didn't note, that Tesla stock really dunked between the time when Musk joined the Trump campaign, so to speak, and was involved with Doge. So Tesla company should be mentioning that as well. Now, in other news, Peter Thiel, who we saw recently in Hungary with Orban and disgraced former Chancellor of Austria, courts, his company Palantir hit the quarterly revenue. And because they got so much money from the federal government, their quarterly revenue is $1 billion. This is a revenue. We're not saying, Okay, so AI fueled demand pushed Palantir to $1 billion in quarterly revenue, up 48%. This is not AI demand. I just literally told you that the government has hired 3 companies to fill their gap. Palantir is literally serving the DoD, right? Pentagon, in other words. That's where Palantir is installed, to the point where Palantir has to be installed between all intelligence agencies and Ukraine. And that's where Trump was very much pissed when, remember, Ukraine attacked Russian side, when their idea was to sort of just feed Ukrainians whatever intelligence they need to know, not everything that would come their way. So all the intelligence agencies are reporting to Palantir, and Palantir is what reports to, or sort of, they say they're sorting information and feeding it to Ukraine. And Ukraine agreed to it, but they also used other sources, if you will. So demand for AI, or is it a thing, right? And if somebody earns $1 billion in a quarter, so what, minimum $4 billion in a year? Yeah. Tony says, hey, Tony, tech bro, international mafia. Right. Exactly. Or, technocracy, whatever. We discussed it last week, and we don't even know. And Bonnie says Teal is bad news. Absolutely. And we don't even know what the consequences of such thing would be, because we've never literally experienced it. What will be the consequences of installing Palantir in Pentagon that handles all the military aid sales, or all the connection with NATO forces, right? Having Palantir directing it and their AI system directing it will certainly affect our allies, or former allies, or whatever you may call it. But we do have military bases all across Europe. We have it in Germany. We also are very much active in Indo-Pacific. So how is that will be affecting our allies? Will they be agreeing with this, right? Is there a security breach? So let's see what will happen. Now, Trump will be signing an executive order later today. And there's 2 options to go about it. We don't know. We have no clarity. At least I don't know. Maybe you have heard it. Tell me. What this EO would be. On one hand, they announced a drone domination. They put this video with marching Chinese and Russians and everything. And they said, no, we're declaring America's drone domination. What is that? We know that Iran produced Shaheds. They came up with this. They also made them better. Hence, their aid to Russia, and also feedback that they're getting from Russia and Russia's war against Ukraine and invasion of Ukraine. We know that Chinese are getting intelligence from Russia as well, and enhancing their drones and their capabilities. U.S. certainly did get feedback from Ukraine, and this is a very important aspect of providing aid to Ukraine, because the Patriot systems and other systems that are being used by Ukrainians, they are getting a feedback on, and they can certainly enhance, or we can enhance, our capabilities. So, but to declare that United States really owns drone domination or whatever, well, if anything, this could come in the way of executive order, or it could be this. So the White House is drafting an executive order to penalize banks that allegedly drop clients for political reasons. And this comes from this question that Trump answered during the weekend, where he said to one of the reporters, he said that, I know that the banks are hating MAGA, and they're dropping MAGA clients just because they're MAGA. And so this now manifests in this executive order. It has nothing to do with equality or with aiding Democratic clients or whatnot. No. Let's just be realistic here. So the proposed order would direct regulators to investigate potential violations of antitrust, consumer protection, and equal credit laws, according to leaked draft reviewed by Wall Street Journal. So If you ask me, I think this is the executive order that he will be signing later. If you again ask me for my opinion, I think universities had to pay up. Now the banks will have to pay up. Law firms had to pay up, right? Pay to play. I guess that's bank's turn. So Jared says that's not corrupt at all. Exactly. Exactly. Nothing to see here. Absolutely not. Now, as to global affairs, let's talk about Israel and what Israel does. The Israeli government voted to dismiss its attorney general, who had investigated Prime Minister Netanyahu. Rings the bell. However, the Supreme Court temporarily blocked the firing, citing legal concerns. Oh no, you don't say. Now, meanwhile, internal tensions rise over Gaza war policy. So, and this is a bit of, the readout point by point. So Netanyahu may ask for full conquest of Gaza. That video that we discussed yesterday, that showed an Israeli detainee or somebody who is held by Hamas, and this gentleman is starving and was shown digging his own grave, which is horrific. But now Israel is using this video to justify full conquest of Gaza, and this Trump Gaza is sort of a part of the plan. So US is not speaking against it, but the entire international community actually does. So, Israeli military leaders reportedly oppose this escalation. And what is very interesting, that 600 former security officials, Israeli security officials, wrote a letter to international community and to Trump urging to push Netanyahu toward ending the war. So, within the Israeli system, or those who were involved in national security, and those are advisors and people in the army and high rank, folks, they all signed this letter asking Trump to push Netanyahu to stop the war. If you ask me again, adding my 2 cents to it, it's none of Trump's interest to stop the war. He wants Trump Gaza. He showed you the video. Same as we saw Project 2025. They show it, and then they follow the steps. So let's not be surprised if something manifests. So they actually do follow up on their promises. Now, 6 countries airdropped food to Gaza, right? We saw first was Canada, then it was France and UK, and so others joined, and Germany as well. Now, with Canada accusing Israel of violating international law. Now, Canada was and is the country that now accused officially Israel. We'll see what will come out of it. UN is beginning or is continuing their discussion on a 2-state solution. All those steps are needed to have a vote on it, which of course, expected US will block and veto in September during UN General Assembly. This is end of September in New York, where all the leaders will be there advocating for a 2-state solution. So now they're going through those steps. They're also today they're having a discussion on how to free Israelis held by Hamas and what the steps would be as well. So speaking of UN also began plastic pollution treaty talks. And so delegates are meeting in Geneva to negotiate a global treaty on plastic pollution. A recent Lancet study estimates $1.5 trillion in annual health-related economic losses from plastic-related damage. Again, if you ask me, I think UN is inefficient, but it is a good point to bring up, and I hope and I wish media would have covered it enough. But we're talking about what we're not supposed to be. Bonnie says Bibi is a bilingual Trump clone. Yep. A bunch of old rich men talk while children are being bombed. Exactly, right? And that the discussion, Jared, that what we brought up yesterday, where, we saw the video from Hamas showing the Israeli hostage, and then people start saying, why don't you talk about that? Why do you talk about the children? And others start saying, well, there's a different scale. There's 30,000 children dead, and there's one hostage or several hostages, so you can't do the scale. This is a wrong discussion to even continue. One death is a tragedy. So let's not get into this divisive discussions as to scale here. More died here, so this prevails, or more died there. Why are we in this limbo for years now, where Israel was about to eliminate Hamas but somehow does not do it and prolongs the war? And meanwhile, we know Netanyahu is being investigated, and now he's trying to impeach this the judge or the attorney general that does investigate him. And Netanyahu is prolonging the war when he cannot. He even, this surgery, he had the prostate situation, and he said, I want to have a surgery. There's no demand for it, but I want to have it now. And that delayed his testimony in court and whatnot. So we see what is happening. We also see how his views are aligning with Trump. And we saw it in the Oval Office. This is not a secret. So, okay. Now let's continue. Syria. So the Syrian Democratic Forces, the SDF, reported new clashes with government troops in Aleppo. Despite a prior agreement to integrate SDF forces in the national military. Now, the conflict also flared in Sveda, another city, displacing tens of thousands. So, as much as we hoped that peace and democracy will prosper in Syria after the dictatorship was removed, still they're trying to figure it out. Will international communities step more to help navigate it? We'll see. Now, Trump certainly yesterday tweeted and threatening to increase tariffs on Indian products, which again, we will pay for. Those are the secondary tariffs on Russia, right? Meaning because India buys oil from Russia, products from India will be more expensive for you and I. Please tell me this makes sense, but okay. Now, Trump said he will substantially increase tariffs on India up to 500% for continuing to buy Russian oil, calling it is a betrayal of U.S. sanctions policy. Now, India's government finally issued an answer. They called the move unjustified and said it has not ordered refineries to stop Russian imports, which was heavily reported in U.S. media last week, saying that Modi got so scared, he stopped purchasing from Russia. This was then spread all across Ukraine. Ukrainians this morning came up with a fresh idea that, oh my God, if Trump imposes these sanctions or this secondary tariffs on India now or on Russia, which will affect India, then Trump will get golden statues all across Ukraine and whatnot. I understand people in Ukraine are suffering every day and every night. They're being targeted. Every single person is a target. So they're looking for desperate solutions, and desperate times lead to desperate measures and desperate clickbaity headlines. But let's just be realistic and see what this will result in. I do not believe that India will stop purchasing from Russia, nor I will believe that China will stop purchasing from Russia, because they purchase oil at price value, because they have their relation with Russia. They also signed this deal of unconditional support for Russian invasion of Ukraine. So they also have BRICS. BRICS also will create their cryptocurrency. Like, let's just be realistic and see what those connections are. Now, as to Bolsonaro, right, let's talk about Brazil real quick. Brazil's Supreme Court placed former President Bolsonaro under house arrest amid trial proceedings over an attempted coup. The Trump administration condemned the move, calling the trial politicized, and hence our now tariffs on products from Brazil. 50% tariff is set. Brazil is not bending over. Brazil actually doesn't want to even come to the White House to negotiate, but they are seeking communication. They're seeking ways to start negotiating and talking. And then Lula mentioned that Trump is not interested in doing that. He's interested in clickbaity headlines, but there is no discussion that would actually lead to any type of result. So, Moldova, we're traveling now back to Europe, in Moldova. So in Moldova, what we need to understand, there is a part of Moldova that is, it's a region within Moldova. It's called Gagauzia. And this region it's tiny, but it's very pro-Russian. And so the leader of that Gagauzia region was a young lady, and she traveled to Kremlin last year, and this was everywhere in Russian-speaking news. And she got flowers from Putin. She kissed the ring. She did all that. He was, amused and smoothed. She was mesmerized with his antiques and all that. Why Russia is doing it? They wanted to plant the seed within Moldova to cause some type of civil war or any type of thing where Russia could then come into Moldova and, as they portrayed it in Ukraine, start protecting Russian speaking folks, right? So, what did happen? Moldova took charge. And Yevgenia Gutsul, this is the young lady, the leader of Gagauzia, the former now head of Moldova's Gagauzia region and close Putin ally, was sentenced to 7 years in prison for illegal campaign funding in 2023. So they are eliminating the Russian assets, if you will. Now, speaking of Czech Republic, remember Petr Pavel, and I posted his photo of from a concert, and everybody was like, "Oh my God, he is so sassy." He is sassy. He is also former general at NATO, but he said something. Perhaps it's realistic, but it's certainly hurtful to hear. He said that the Czech president, Petr Pavel, stated that if preserving Ukrainian independence means temporarily accepting territorial loss, so be it, while reaffirming that the West will never recognize those regions as Russian. But he essentially says, hey guys, just accept, give Putin the occupied areas and more, if this will cause ceasefire. Now, is it in the interest of Czech Republic? Absolutely. Is it in the interest of Poland? Absolutely. For now. But what we need to understand, that if you are considering Putin's psyche, this is a murderous dictator. If anything, a ceasefire would give him time to get even stronger, to then invade further. You don't feed the beast by giving him, by feeding him bit by bit. The beast is only going to get hungrier, and they will see that, look, if the game is now that I push and I get something, now I can just get everything because you are now in this mode of conceding. So, might be interesting from the Czech Republic's perspective if they were to consider Putin as somebody who is self-conscious, who is actually aware of what is happening. This guy's unhinged. So, and I also would like to return the conversation back to Ukraine and give Ukrainians a say as to what they're willing to give up and what they're not willing to give up. Because if you were to consider this, you would be giving up a part of Ukraine where I was born, where my parents have house, where we have a bunch of relatives who did not want to leave, where we have friends, where people speak Russian, where people are tortured daily. The house that my parents own, and my family house, was occupied by Russians, was bombed on day one. Russian forces were living in it. Now Ukrainian forces are living in it, and is seized by state because of the war. So are you willing to give our land up because this will give you a ceasefire? No. This will only lead to people who are there, Ukrainians, to fight on behalf of Russians, and women to be raped by Russians, and kids to be raped by Russians. So when you have this big romantic ideas, dig deeper, speak to people. Because probably you wouldn't like it if Ukrainians would be commenting that perhaps you should just give California to Mexico because, look, it's being invaded. Trump says there's a lot of invasion. A lot of people are crossing the borders. Just give up California. Just give up Texas. You wouldn't like it? We don't like it either. So now, as to Putin, on Friday, exactly. Jared says Czechs gave up Sudanland. How did that turn out? Thank you. Bonnie said what works. Just ask Timberlane. And yeah, exactly. Thank you, Bonnie. Now let's talk about Putin. How he is reacting to Trump's deadline. Remember, Trump gave him 50 days, which would be somewhere around September 2nd. Then he said, no, it's going to be 10 days. And those 10 days are, I believe he says it like that, yes. And those 10 days are ending on August 7th. Today is August 5th, so Friday. And Putin said, well, sources told Reuters that Putin is not expected to comply with Trump's sanctions ultimatum set to expire this Friday. Moscow continues to pursue full control of 4 Ukrainian regions, and they're not interested in any discussion or ceasefire. And especially now, since they got an answer from China and India that nobody's going to, stop purchasing. The good news, who stopped purchasing from Russia, is the EU, and they are stopping to. Let me put that on Blue Sky. Let me put an article so you will get the details. But they're stopping to purchase from Russia, and they're diverting their purchase power towards Canada. But let me put the whole article about it so you can get the details. Okay. Now, as to China and critical mineral exports, China is limiting the export of key minerals needed by Western defense contractors, delaying weapons production. Satellite imagery also shows China is test flying a new stealthy tailless combat jet, possibly a drone. They did announce it last year. They also showed it at an air aviation show in China. I do believe it's a drone. We saw the pictures of it. I posted it last year. I sort of covered it last year. So they're now producing it at scale. But again, they're limiting the export of minerals. So U.S. will be delayed in the delivery of whatever NATO is now in need of purchasing from the U.S. So here we are. Now, EU also delays tariff retaliation against US. Remember, Trump imposed tariffs on EU. They have been lowered to 15%. EU said, especially the president of the EU Commission, von der Leyen, she says, well, we're going to have reciprocal tariffs. Now they're dropping those tariffs. The European Union has formally delayed 2 retaliation packages against US tariffs for 6 months, allowing more time to finalize duty structures, including on spirits. This is very important for Bordeaux region in France. It's very important for Scotland specifically. So, and their economies, those specific regions are very much dependent on it. I think EU is playing Trump as much as they promised to purchase $600 billion worth of military aid and then realized that's what we actually already purchasing. And then $750 billion worth of goods. And then, we actually already purchasing it. And this was actually over Trump's term. So ultimately I think it's a delay just to appease Trump, but also delay him. Now, Swiss leaders, speaking of negotiations, Swiss leaders rushed to Washington, and they arrived on Tuesday, today. The Swiss president, Karin Keller-Sutter, and business minister, Guy Parmelin, traveled to Washington today in any attempt to prevent 39% tariffs on Swiss exports announced by Trump. So let's see how this will work. Certainly, they're not getting the Oval Office exposure. Nothing has been, announced in terms of like another PR stunt, but I guess because Trump's allies have so many assets in Switzerland, so this needs to be discussed off the record. Now, what is coming up? UN Security Council, as I mentioned, holds a special session on Gaza hostages today. UN conference on landlocked developed countries or developing countries begins in Turkmenistan today, and Belarus foreign minister visits Indonesia. Remember Indonesia that was negotiating with Trump, got some results, but not much. Now they're meeting with Belarus. Belarus is a communicator from Russia or of Russia. So, yeah. And then Poland's new president will be sworn in tomorrow, Karol Nawrocki. Not big fan of Ukraine, but some statements align, some statements not. Let's see how this will progress, but let's give them benefit of doubt for now. All right. And this is it. I wasted enough of your time. Thank you so much for being here. Please like this. Please subscribe. I would be very grateful so more people would get this video to watch. And also, we have short newsletters coming now daily, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. And on Saturday, we have a deep dive newsletter, like what we used to have earlier. I heard you said you don't have really much time to read and all that, but Saturday will be our sort of weekly recap with deep dives and some articles that you can, tap and read, and some videos as well. So Saturday is a longer political analysis, if you may, newsletter, and then Monday through Friday, shorter ones, exactly what I use to read out the news here for you. And there's a video as well. And then on Sunday, of course, we have the No Politics Sunday edition. And for that, we also will have more videos and interviews coming up. And I will share more about that soon. Jared said, thanks. Thank you. Thank you. Jeff says, very good. And thank you, Olga. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Bonnie. Thank you. Who was there here? Commenting, Tony. And in the beginning, we also had Martha. And we have a bunch of other folks. Thank you so much for joining. I appreciate you. Stay safe. As I always say, keep your head on a swivel. And I will see you tomorrow at noon for another video recap. Thank you for being here.